welcome.
Good morning. Welcome back, Jonathan.
Yes.
We missed you last week.
It's good to be here. You got great discussion with Sean Sima.
I tried. Thank you.
Yep.
It was fun. We went over a lot of stuff last week.
And this week we're joined by Lisa Olson.
Yeah, good morning, guys.
Yes.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We're glad you could make it in after a very eventful last week or two in Minot.
There have been a few things going on. Someone said you've had a heck of a month this last week.
Yeah.
And that pretty much described it.
It's been that way since like the middle of March at this point.
So on your time as council, you've served a couple terms.
Yes.
So I'm sure there's been other times that were very busy. Is there a comparative time, not just busyness, but also like intense things that you guys are covering? Has there been a time that compares to like the last 6 months?
Oh, I think so. Some of the time, well, certainly following the 2011 flood, we
Right,
had
yep.
a lot going on. We had a lot of meetings. We had, a lot of people who wanted answers to questions that we didn't necessarily have the answers to.
You wanted them to.
So I think that was impactful. And then I think more recently, it's been more cultural things. We certainly had a lot going on when we were considering the Human Relations Committee. And again, lots of opinions, lots of ideas of where we should go with that. So it kind of ebbs and flows.
That's another interesting thing too, because as you have been on council over the last many years, have you seen the types of issues change that have come up where now you're not just addressing, which has been a recent one, but the noise ordinance downtown, but where it's ordinances, but you have the culture stuff that's also, for better or for worse, I'm not saying that part, but just kind of going into the city, like how the city begins to deal with it.
I would say early on, and I've been on for 15 years, entering my 16th year. Certainly, I think in the beginning it was more taxes, monetary things that, subject around money.
Right.
However that would be, whether it was economic development, that kind of thing. Now it's been a lot more of the cultural thing. And I think we're seeing that both at the state and national level too. So it's not unique to Minot.
Especially back in 2020 when COVID first came in and everything too.
Yes.
That was a very tumultuous period as
It
well.
certainly was.
That stage and that whole summer and
Right.
Yeah.
That had to be interesting though, because you guys had just gotten live stream stuff. I think we had Derek Hackett on and he's like, we had just been experimenting with like trying to figure this out. And all of a sudden we needed it. So that was definitely, it seems like there's always something.
That was, I was still teaching in 2020 as well.
Oh.
And, we had some experience with Zoom or Teams, but you were drinking from a fire hose at that point, trying to learn real quick.
I had something I didn't realize I signed up for during that. We were taking care of a couple of kids and I wasn't ready to go and figure out how to teach math to I know how that works, but I didn't know how to teach it.
How to convey it to someone else. It's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And how was that transition from teaching in the classroom to teaching solely online at that stage?
Well, and at that point, I was a school administrator, so it's a little bit different. Okay. But there was a lot of stress for everyone involved. There was stress for the teachers who were trying to teach. It was stressful for the caregivers, whether it was the parents or the grandparents, whoever had those kids during the day. And stressful for the kids too, because they had to do a lot of independent learning. You could put the assignments online, but that didn't necessarily mean they were being taught. And the world was weird at that point, definitely.
just a dish.
So what we learned is about every 4 to 5 years, there's something substantial, like beyond the normal ebbs and flows that are just really stand out. And hopefully this is that thing. Hopefully
this is the end of those things at this point.
Right. Yeah. For these 4 or 5 years. That's not what we want to talk about today, but good discussion. So let's open the floor with childcare. That's probably where we're going to spend the most amount of time today. We're also going to talk about education, savings accounts, but also education system as a whole, and then also dive into just a basic update on the special election for all those wondering what we're talking about today. But we're going to kick it off with childcare. So this is something that has come up. Obviously, there's been a committee that you guys have been working on this topic for a while as far as those committees go, and have gotten a lot of good feedback. You guys have sat down with daycare owners. You guys have sat down with, I believe, citizens and stuff like that that would be using the daycares and things like that. It's been a very comprehensive thing. And I think you guys finally had a presentation to council, which has sparked a lot of discussion. I shouldn't say a presentation. basically a start to solutions to
Yes.
council that has sparked a lot of discussion, which has been good. So I think basically just to kick it off, kind of just give an overview of kind of as you guys sat down and had these interviews, had these talks, what you guys kind of found with the childcare situation in Minot, which I know you've kind of already presented before at council, but.
Right. So, briefly, we've been meeting for about 2 years. It was a committee that was chaired in the beginning by Alderman Scott Burlingame.
Right.
And he had a passion, certainly, for finding solutions to our childcare issues. He had a lot of people reach out to him. So that was the purpose of our committee. And we have a pretty good variety of people on our committee. We certainly have elected people, but we have some daycare owners, we have some parents, we have some HR specialists, we have some that are experts in childcare at the state level. So it's been, a good mix. And we did a lot of fact finding. And, not surprisingly, we found out that there isn't enough childcare available, not only in Minot, but across the state. It's an issue. And because of the lack of childcare, it really impacts a lot of the other things that we do. Certainly impacts workforce.
Right.
It impacts economic development. It impacts education. And so in all of that time, we really hadn't brought any kind of resolution to the city because I'd say, quite frankly, we didn't really know what the city's role in it was other than information sharing. And I'll give a side note there. One of the tasks that we had assigned out was to get a book of resources.
Okay.
And MAC-EDC took that and created a wonderful resource guide that is on their website, and it is on the City of Minot website. So it's just every question that you would ever want to have answered regarding childcare, it's on there.
Wow.
So during that time, our city assessor was doing some audits of different, programs that come through his office. So he said that there's about 900 tax exemptions that are in the city. And so periodically they go through them.
Yep.
And he realized a few weeks ago that there were a number of childcare centers that were operating in nonprofit buildings. And I think all of them at this point were in churches, but it wouldn't necessarily just have to be in a church, but that was kind of the situation. Well, his interpretation of the law was that those nonprofits or the church buildings would need to be levied a property tax because they had a for-profit business happening in their building.
Yep.
So he mentioned it to me. I said, let's run it past the child care committee, get their preference on, what should we do? Yeah. So we reviewed the resolution, and they unanimously said, bring it to city council and have it considered.
Gotcha.
So at our last meeting, we had a resolution that would have made not only the child care centers in the nonprofits, but child care centers across the city tax exempt.
I see.
And this does follow the process, or I should say the kind of policy or procedure that are happening in many other communities across the state of North Dakota. They have made all child care centers exempt because I think they're seeing what we're seeing. And it's just a small benefit that you can give to child care centers. Well, ultimately, we voted on it, and it failed on a 4-2 vote.
Right.
So, again, I don't I don't blame people for not necessarily following our really long agendas and going through them with fine-tooth combs. I think at that meeting we had 34 items on consent and 8 more that we were dealing with. And so then the nonprofits became aware that they might be levied a property tax, and now there's a concern.
Right, yeah. I'm sure there's a major concern now with that. So, but you mentioned that this resolution is not something that was going to be unique to Minot. No. It's something that you guys have seen across the state in a lot of the major cities, or is it? I'm sure you didn't look at every city, but a lot of the major cities
comparable to Minot.
Exactly, and it is something that is allowed for in the Century Code. It says that a municipality may allow a tax exemption, and it's not only for child care centers. I don't have the wording in front of me. Adult daycare. There were a few other situations that it would allow for. So the municipality can do that. It does not include residential childcare because that's been a question, but the Century Code does not allow for residential childcare to be tax exempt.
So it would have to be to get that tax exemption. It wouldn't be eligible for someone operating a daycare in their own home. Then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And then one more question on that is is it just for the nonprofit daycare centers, or is it for just blanket? Either way, as long as it's not resident in your home.
So Century Code allows for it, and in fact, we cannot separate the two out because then you are giving one an advantage over the other. You're picking winners and losers. Sure. And so if we pass the resolution, then it would include all child care centers.
All child care centers. Very cool. Which is a major problem. The child care situation itself is a major problem in Minot. Well, not in Minot. It is in Minot, but it's across the state, and it's probably across the U.S., I'm sure. Yeah. Because just basically, I in my opinion, and I correct me or provide more perspective, it feels like the dynamics of the home dynamics are changing because of inflation, whatever you want to put the reason as is fine. But you're seeing a lot more two-income households now, and that's been something that has picked up over the last probably
generation.
Yeah, for several years. It's not a 2025 problem. So it's been, and so now we're getting to the point like, okay, how do we balance childcare? Because now all the daycare centers are getting full, all the childcare centers, and they have been full for a while. This is something that is kind of come along for a while here. So I guess what is, from your guys' you look at the property tax, but what do you guys see as a solution? Like, is there, and I know that's the question that everybody wants to know, but what, as you guys have processed this, what are some of the solutions or some of the perspectives that you guys have gained as you've sat down with these parents with these daycare centers?
Well, certainly availability and accessibility are probably the two key proponents, because right now, and I've heard differing data, but the numbers are low no matter what. I've heard between 17% and 24% availability, the spots in childcare centers for parents who are looking for childcare. Right. So the majority of parents are having an issue trying to find childcare. Right. Certainly childcare centers that are available 24/7, because we have a number of parents, whether they're in the military, they're in police, fire, they're working medical jobs. Yep. They don't work 8 to 5, and so the typical childcare center hours don't work well for them. Point. So I think those are probably the top two things. And, again, the city should take a limited role in that. I do agree with that. I think that the free market system should be able to handle some of this. But if there's something as a city that we can make as a small incentive to not only maintain the child care centers that we have, but encourage others to open up, this is probably the best bet.
Sure. Right, It almost feels like at this point the free market's almost going in a circle on itself with the issue, because there's such a low availability that just drives the prices up. So now not only are you having a lack of availability for parents searching, but you're also having prices being raised on childcare across the board.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit about it last week, but it's the weirdest problem because I gave the archaic idea of saying, okay, go back to a one-income household. And then I said that wouldn't work, though, because if you went to a one-income household and you went and you tightened your belt and you made the budget work, then you lose all your policemen or you lose all your nurses.
Exactly. We're already in a workforce shortage. Right. So now if you can theoretically make that happen where you only have a household income, how many people are you losing out of the job force in Minot at this point?
A lot. So there was, and I don't know the exact numbers, but Minot Public School Administration reached out to us a few months ago with the concern that there were a number of child care centers that were closing at the end of the school year where teaching staff had their children. Yep. And if there's not a place for those children, we're going to lose teachers. So that has a negative impact on the students that are in school, because then all of a sudden your classroom of 22, 23 becomes 28, 29. Yep. And it just makes it more difficult for everyone. You know
firsthand about that, I'm sure.
I do. I do. Yes.
Yeah. Good.
There's another part that's it's separate but linked. You look at a place like Surrey that went down to a 4-day school week, and a lot of the issues that arose were people finding childcare for that day of school that wasn't for Fridays.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people I've heard that would like to see a similar system like that come into play in Minot. But one of the side things of it is where you're going to have parents keep their kids on Friday at that point.
Exactly.
And you can always make the argument, make it work, but especially for those kids that are under middle school age, it's hard.
It's very difficult. And I'll just say from a grandparent's point of view where, sometimes grandparents can step in and take on that role. And my husband and I will do that from time to time. We have a little bit more availability than some grandparents do, but it's not always an option to have someone else care for the children and, to work around those jobs.
Right. Yeah. So do you think there is going to be do you think there will be pressure that is put on employers to help solve this problem themselves rather than perhaps the free market, whether that is, creating more flexible work schedules or even creating daycare centers for their employees?
So we've heard of both of those options at the Childcare Committee. There are some incentives made available through the state of North Dakota for employers who will provide childcare for their employees. Yeah. There's some matching dollars, and so that is an option. And I would certainly encourage some businesses to consider that because I don't think that they have jumped on board with that. And we've heard from a number of childcare directors who have said, we'll take people whenever we can get them. If they can only work 10 to 2 because that works around their kids' school schedule, we'll take them from 10 to 2. And I think other employers have, had to meet that criteria as well, but some can't do that. We've heard from a number of military people. They don't get to say, I'm only going to work from 10 to 2
No,
today.
they don't.
They don't have that flexibility.
Even I'm going to take off for an hour and come back.
Exactly. That doesn't work. No.
Yeah. No. Right. Yeah, there's just some jobs where it just cannot happen. Right. I mean, even you think about like at the city, you're not the call center, but I can't think of dispatch. Yeah. You can't just say, I'm going to be, we can be short staffed. You can't be short staffed for too long in that area if you get a lot of calls.
There's minimum staffing numbers and you just don't,
Right.
It doesn't work. And that's not what the community deserves either, to have, our employees coming and going. We need them there doing the job that they were hired to do.
The flip side of this is then say we did have enough daycares, childcare, that part was solved, but the cost stayed the same. It is almost unreasonable. We have 2 kids. My family has 2 kids. Mm-hmm. So our cost for daycare would be somewhere between $2,000 to $2,500 if I'm understanding the averages properly. Mm-hmm. So in order for that to make economic sense, you would need to be having a job. One of us, the one that would then be going to work, would need to be making at least $3,500. Otherwise, you're making $1,000. You're not making very much money, right? And let's look at the actual cost of this. Not only are you only making $1,000, you're having someone else spend a lot of time with your kids for $1,000. That's a hard trade, and I understand that there's necessities in life. I'm not belittling that, but that's another very big issue with the whole childcare is the cost as it has risen up so far. Is there any solutions that are able to be looked at? And I understand that the tax credit might or exemption might be something that helps with that. But is there any solution? I'm sure this has been a topic of discussion as well in your guys' meetings. So get some insight on that.
So in the last legislative session, not our current legislative session, but the last session, they did take a real serious look at childcare needs. And they did make some funds available for families based on their income levels to provide some childcare assistance. Mm-hmm. Sadly, it didn't get marketed real well, and those dollars did not all get claimed. And so then I think what the message that was sent to the current legislative system is, or the current legislative session is that, that didn't work.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because I think that is a way to consider, especially keeping some of those entry-level jobs filled. Like we have people in the service industry that we need there.
Right.
And I get if you're making $15 an hour, you don't want to pay, 50 or 75% of that out for childcare. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
So hopefully that would be an area where the state would reconsider making some of the funds available.
And then and I'm trying to layer all these, call them problems, but they're just areas that you guys are looking for solutions for. You also, it's difficult to get people to work in a daycare, right? Because that's the most cycle part of the whole thing is there's a workforce shortage. We need to get people to work though, and you can't pay them $30 an hour. It's going to be under $20 most likely. Mm-hmm. Maybe if you're a manager, you'd get somewhere around $20 or a little bit higher. So
it's hard to pay a full-time living wage in that industry right now, just the way it's sitting at the moment.
It's incredibly difficult. Now, one thing that I know some of the child care centers have offered is, pardon me, to parents who do have young children on their own. You can bring your children, and either we're not going to charge you, or it'll be, half of the rate, something like that. And that works in some situations, but then you're filling some of those spots too. So, what is the right answer? Yesterday, a number of nonprofit leaders, many from the churches around the area that are being impacted by the failed resolution, met. And a pastor of a local church said, I became the child care director for a number of months last year because our child care director left. We could not pay her enough. We couldn't offer her health insurance. She went to a better paying job. And so it was so difficult to fill that job, but they knew that they couldn't close the center because parents were relying on them. So he said, I worked 40 hours a week as a child care director, and then on the side, I was the lead pastor. That doesn't work for very long.
No, that doesn't.
I mean, not only is it not tenable in the long term, it burns a person out.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's such a struggle. So in a perfect world, what is this? And not in an unreasonably perfect world, but in a reasonable perfect world, what is the solution to the problem, basically?
All right. So right now we are sitting with a couple of options for the child care centers that are impacted by the failed resolution. The first one, and I think this is the direction that a lot of the child care directors and the churches want us to go, is to have it brought back at our next meeting for reconsideration.
Gotcha.
Following Robert's Rule of Order, there are 4 aldermen who can bring it back for reconsideration. There are 2 of us that cannot.
Yeah.
Those 4, I know, are getting a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails to bring it back for reconsideration. I have not heard officially if any of them are going to do it or not. That was brought back for reconsideration. The exact resolution that we looked at last week would be considered again and voted on again. We did hear a bit of good news from our city assessor that there are some options for the child care centers located in the nonprofits. And again, following tax code, if they are offering an education, they can be considered tax exempt. Okay. Well, an established preschool certainly has a curriculum.
Right.
That will be an easy lift for them. Some of the others will have to go back and see if they do have a curriculum. It doesn't necessarily need to be a purchased curriculum, but do the 3-year-olds in January always talk about snow? Do they always talk about presidents in February? Whatever. If they have traditionally been doing things and they can write that up.
Even if you have just a loose.
Exactly. And even, if you're working with 2 and 3-year-olds, you're teaching letters, you're teaching colors, you're teaching table manners, all of those things that probably will be considered an education. And so they will make an application to the city assessor's office, and between the city assessor's office and the city attorney's office, those applications will be reviewed. And if they can meet the criteria for providing an education, they may be tax exempt. Now, none of that will impact the child care centers that are in the commercial buildings right now.
I see.
So it relieves a few fears for the churches that all of a sudden we're going to have to pay $10,000, $20,000 in property tax, whatever it was. I don't think it completely fixes the problem, but it at least addresses one of the issues.
It has a little Band-Aid on it.
Yes. Should alleviate, the church's largest issue that would come from this at this point. And then at that point can go on and start trying to deal with the next step from after that.
And I think there was something that needed to be clarified just briefly in that a lot of people felt that we were taxing child care centers, and we weren't. The property tax would be levied against the church for the portion of the building that was being used. So that was a little bit misunderstood, and I think it's a message that should be out there. They would be the ones that would be levied the property tax.
Okay. Right. And there's an important point there. If you have just for simple numbers, a 10,000 square foot church and 3,000 square feet of that church was used for the daycare center, your property tax would be charged based off of what one? The 3,000 feet or the...
That's my understanding.
Yeah,
okay. Right. Yes. And I did, I was reviewing some of this as well as I was getting phone calls and emails. Yeah. We do have other non-profit buildings within the city of Minot that have for-profit businesses in them, and they are being charged a property tax.
Gotcha.
And our hospital would be one of them, where they have some for-profit businesses inside, and they do pay based on the percentage of space that is used.
Interesting.
So like the coffee shop and the neutrality kind of thing.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Yep.
But again, we're talking childcare. So
Right. Yeah.
yes,
Yep. Yeah. And right. Yeah. That does bring a different discussion for sure. Very interesting. Well,
I think Scott brought up a good point in the comments here. He said the biggest economic barrier facing the business community of Minot is a shortage of workforce. The high cost and unavailability of childcare is keeping people who want to work from working. Every job in childcare creates other jobs in our city.
Yes.
And I think he makes a great point, and workforce shortage is one of the biggest driving factors towards this whole issue.
I've done a few presentations related to this, and my phrase in all of them is economic development begins and ends with childcare.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that.
Well, yeah, if you shut down all the daycare centers in Minot. Well, I'm sure COVID, we kind of talked about that at the beginning, COVID probably affect, I can't go to work even if you want me to because I got 2 kids now at home or whatever it is. It would definitely end things fast. Scott, you're so cool and so familiar with the program. We don't even mention your last name anymore, I guess. Scott Burlingham.
Former Alderman Scott Burlingham, from the show.
And I'm incredibly grateful that Scott had the foresight to get this committee rolling because it's an important discussion that we need to have.
Absolutely.
No, undoubtedly so.
So we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back and we'll continue on with our discussion.
Let's do it.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate.
All right, we are back.
Jonathan over there being the master producer.
Come on, bro. You did a great job Thursday. You're just looking for confidence.
If I can do it, you can do it, clearly.
That's right. All right.
Don't ask me to do it.
It took me like 8 months to figure it out.
So one thing that's interesting that you mentioned is that there's also a survey that went out that you guys were able to collect from business owners, correct?
Yes. And it's on a regular basis. I don't know if it's a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, but MAC EDC will randomly choose businesses and issue a survey to them. Okay. In the effort to not only encourage more businesses to come to town, but maintain the businesses that we have.
That's good.
We don't want them, closing their doors. And so they're asked, there's level of satisfaction on a myriad of different topics, whether it's parks and rec, inspections, education, water and sewage costs. There's just a long list. Mm-hmm. And so the business owners rank their level of comfort, or I guess they're looking at quality of life issues.
I see.
And so I was told by staff at MAC EDC that for 4 years, childcare has been on the bottom of the list. Wow. So this isn't something new. This is something that's been going on, and it impacts our business community. Yeah. We learned from our HR specialist on our childcare committee, who works for a major oil company, that they've tried to issue jobs, really good paying jobs, to individuals to come to Minot, and they'll say, well, I have a family, what's how much childcare is available, and they find out that a waiting list is 2 to 5 years long, and there's thanks but no thanks, we can't come, we can't bring our family there. So it has an impact. We've got a lot of different nuances to consider with childcare, but I'll just go back to my statement: economic development begins and ends with childcare.
But what's crazy to me is this: if when during the flood, right, people got sick and tired of Menards, like terrible customer service, just you name it, right? And I don't know that I agree with it all, but I'm just saying, like, there was a lot of,
it was a narrative,
right?
Yeah.
Home Depot pops up, right? And there have been child care centers that have popped up. But my point is, if there's a 2 to 5 year wait list for something, typically there's a competitor that's like, all right, fine, I'll step into the market. Mm-hmm. This is a really good market to get into. But people don't want to do that with childcare because of how difficult it really is to actually provide that service. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. It is. Plus the sense of liability that goes along with it too. It's not a cheap thing to get into. You have to have the location. Right. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and it's expensive. Yeah. It's expensive, and it's expensive for the parents. It's expensive for the daycare center, and there's not huge margins. But it's just crazy. Such a weird problem. Yeah. I don't know how to describe it. Weird's not the right word, but it's a very cyclical thing. Yeah,
it's one thing leads to the other, and it just keeps revolving.
Exactly. Yeah, they're all intertwined, and we're not going to fix it with this resolution, but we might make a little dent.
Right. It's just it's going to be a process of steps.
So you'd have to have someone bring this up next meeting. Is there anything else that is planned about a week out that you could see happening at next meeting? Unless someone brings it up, if someone doesn't bring it up? No,
then we'll just kind of have to go back to the drawing board. And I'm not exactly sure what the next step would be. Fair. I was hopeful that maybe we could split out that resolution and solely look at the child care centers, the nonprofits, and we cannot do that. So really? I don't know what next step is.
So you can't, goes down a rabbit hole here, but can you create a new resolution that does that?
No, because it would be unlawful.
Okay. Wow. Goes against century code at that point?
Or tax law or whatever it is.
I don't know. I got you. That part. Cannot, it's not against Robert's Rules of Orders. No. It's against actual law. Gotcha. Yes. I see. Yeah. Very cool. All right. Very interesting. Something that is going to happen. Well, we don't know if it's going to happen, but something that may be on the agenda for next city council. Oh wait, I want to say this. She can't say it probably, or she may not want to say it. But the 4 people, if you're curious about this problem, I want to get back on the agenda. The people you need to reach out to is Alderman or Acting Mayor Mark Janser, Alderman Rob Fuller, Alderman Scott Samuelson, or Alderman Mike Blessum.
Yeah.
So no.
I got it mixed up.
You did. Sorry. So Alderman Janser and myself voted in favor of the resolution. Okay. So it would be Fuller, Samuelson, Pittner, or Blessum. One of those 4 gentlemen.
I got my votes mixed up.
Back. Yeah,
there was a different one that was that 4-2.
Like
my
8
bad.
Things on the agenda.
No, for some reason I thought it was that one, but yep, I remember that now. And so we will move on.
That's why you're here, Lisa.
Sure.
What else? So going
next week. There's going to be something on the agenda most likely, and it's going to be about a special election of some type. We'll see the agenda later this week for sure. So obviously we're not going to go. We've talked about it. I'm almost sick of talking about it.
You can watch an hour of it from last Thursday, pretty much. Yeah.
But the biggest deal is this: is basically it sounds like, and it has been confirmed that there has been enough signatures that have been received for a petition for a special election. So you guys are going to get that. What we've heard from a lot of people, and you don't have to confirm or deny that you guys do not want to do this, or I guess you don't need to speak for the council, but odds of it happening during the state fair, high or low?
I think it's low.
Yeah.
Because the earliest date's July 20th, which is a Sunday. And
my preference would be first week in August.
Yeah, fair. Makes sense. Yeah,
I think that would. Yeah,
I still don't think it's an ideal time, but I think it's better than during the fair.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's hard doing it during the summer, and it will be interesting to compare the turnout between that one
and the election.
Yeah.
With that,
seems like both of them are stuff that people should care about. I should say.
And I'll say last June could not have been a more contested primary race, city election race, and what were we at? 12%, 13%. I mean, so I am very fearful that this will have a low voter turnout. But I guess I would love to be proven wrong. I'd love to have lots of people standing in line waiting to vote.
Yeah,
and I hope to see it. We will do everything we can, of course, with our platform to get people out. Yeah.
Kyler is excited because as soon as he found out there might be a special election, he's like, "Oh, cool! I can do polls." That's like all he wanted to do.
I plan on doing polling.
So the more special elections you guys can have, I guess he's about it.
Yeah, well, $20,000 per election. I mean, not that I don't think it's an exorbitant cost.
No, that's not the point.
The principle of it.
Yeah, it's
the fact that Because Kyler at the Dakotan loves this. I can do some polling stuff,
Yeah.
but
Right.
me, Kyler, like it feels just pointless. I mean,
Right.
but
And here I'll add in my point of view on this. There were enough people who signed a petition to call for the special election, and I respect that. I respect it 100%. And we're seeing a lot of jockeying now to see who will be our next mayor. Two of the declared candidates already sit on Minot City Council.
Right.
So the people that have indicated that they want to change, they want a new start, that doesn't change anything. The mayor's vote has no more significance than any other.
Right.
So we're still going to sit with similar votes.
Yep.
It's that next person that truly sets the trajectory on where we go in the next number of months, and I guess I would probably argue the next number of years, because the person that fills that spot likely will run in 26 and stay on.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are looking at that mayor, and the mayor has a role. They're the public face of the city of Minot, but vote number 7 to me is the most intriguing.
Yeah, right. So the person that fills, so if either Janser or Fuller, those are the two declared candidates on council.
Yes.
So let's look at them individually. If Janser won the mayoral race, and then basically, I think you guys are almost going to have to appoint someone. I don't even think that a special election is going to be in the cards because of timelines. It can barely get in it.
It's tight, but I mean,
there'd be like a 3-week period where it could
these signatures were collected in a couple of days. So anyway, I wouldn't rule it out, but an appointment is probably more likely.
Either way, whether it's appointment or special election, they just fill out that term, right?
Yes.
And so for Janser, for Janser's term, it ends next June, and then for Fuller's term, it is.
Actually, no. You serve until the next election.
Okay.
So no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah, it'd be June 26th.
Yeah, so if it was Fuller, they would have to run for re-election in next June to fill out the remainder of that term. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So as exciting as a special election is, that there's a good chance. Well, yeah, there's a good chance that 2026 one's gonna be extra exciting.
Yeah.
Because there's gonna be a lot. There's potentially no guarantee.
There's a chance there could be 4 seats on
four seats and the mayor, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that right?
If Fuller were to win, there could be 4
Fuller or Janser.
Yeah, regardless. Yeah.
Right, because it's whoever's on council. If Fuller or Janser were to win.
Right. Yep. And then if Janser wins, his seat is open next summer anyways.
It is. So, as is Alderman Bittner's and as is mine. Yeah. And I've been very public in saying I'm retiring, and so I'm encouraging people to start considering running for that June 26th election.
Lo and behold, the way elections work, it's already time to start thinking about those things.
It definitely is. Yep. Yeah.
When you say retire, you're retiring from city council, from being an alder woman.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that you run for mayor in 2026? I know it's way too early. You're not going to directly comment. There's not.
I will say no.
Okay.
So I started working when I was 15 years old, and I've never stopped. I've ended a few jobs and started a few new ones. I need to experience at least 2 years of not having that responsibility. Yeah. I'm not saying I would never consider coming back, but I've promised my family that I'm giving it at least 2 years.
Time for a little break and a deep breath.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Definitely stay tuned. The city council meetings have been getting a lot of views online, so I anticipate Mondays to be not much different.
There's a lot of reasons, but the last 3 city council meetings are all on the YouTube page, among the most 20 viewed that you guys have had.
Yeah.
And that goes back 6 years. So
it's funny. I mean, whatever. I live in Minot. I do normal Minot things that everybody else does. I go to the grocery store. I go to the mall. I go to church, whatever it is. And I'm always surprised at people who come up and say, I watched the meeting.
Nice.
Really? Did you watch the whole thing?
Yeah.
And they do. Right. They really do. So, we don't see as many people sitting in the seats anymore, but the engagement online is growing and growing.
Right. I feel like there's actually been a change for whatever reason in the last year or two. and I think that's neat because that's been a priority of your guys' on council. Like we want to increase engagement. That's been something pushing with the city employees and things like that. It's happening. It's probably just happening in a different, like it's difficult to measure and it's difficult to understand how effective it is. And like, there's those things that you have to figure out, but yeah, it seems like it's increasing, which is good.
Definitely. And it's also the availability of allowing people to watch when they can watch.
That's huge.
Not everyone is available at 5:30 on a Monday night,
right?
But they might be watching it at 10, or they might be watching it at 2:00 the next day, however it is. So the information that we're voting on, we're discussing, is still it's out there, and I appreciate the fact that people are taking the time to watch.
Right, absolutely. So stay tuned for City Council Monday, 5:30. Big updates that will, I think, a lot of direction.
Next Monday,
21st.
21st.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it was the day after Easter, so I wasn't 100% sure if it was. Okay.
Friday's a closed day.
Yeah, Friday's when everyone's closed. All right, that makes sense.
Unmanned Operator says monetize the City of Minot YouTube page.
Start selling some ads.
Give all the money to daycare. Solved.
There you go. A few bucks a month. Be better than nothing.
All right.
Before we move on to education, I had one thing I got to bring up real fast.
Sure.
So I did some prep work on this. I went and looked back at a couple interviews we've done with you before.
Okay.
Did you know that you were on our very first show of Minot Talk?
No, I didn't realize that.
Yep, you were one of our very first guests. So we had
Okay.
you and Jennifer Clean that day.
Oh, I do remember that one. Yes, it was a Zoom interview.
Yep.
Okay, yes,
not
I
in
do.
person.
Yeah.
So I just got to say thank you for being one of our earliest supporters.
Oh,
absolutely.
And I view all the time. So
Thank
even
you.
when
Appreciate
I'm not on, I'm always viewing.
We appreciate that. We
Yeah.
appreciate every view we get from everyone out there. But talk about some education stuff going on right now. We've been mentioning some of the classroom situations that have changed since COVID. One of the biggest things that I've heard from some of the teachers I know is students having phones in classrooms. And obviously there's a big bill going in the legislature right now to ban the phones in the classrooms. And a lot of the teachers I know are in favor of that, but a lot of parents I know are against it, whether it be because they would rather see the school district do it or they want to have that easy access to their student or to their child. How do you lean on that?
Well, so I've been retired since 21. So my experience in the classroom, is based on 21 and prior.
Sure.
But certainly we were dealing with cell phones for years before that time. And they are an issue. They certainly are an issue. And I will argue they're not only an issue for students, they're an issue for everyone, because everyone has their phone in their pocket and they want to grab it. We tried many different ways and times to set policy. And honestly, you could have a full-time person just policing cell phones.
Yeah.
It becomes exhausting.
Yeah.
So I am in favor of some sort of policy that would require them to be put away the majority of the time. I think it's a weak argument from parents that they want to have constant communication with their kids. It doesn't happen very often, truly. And it's usually not a message that couldn't be called into the school office and have conveyed to the student. You have a dentist appointment at 2:00, I'll be there at 1:45.
Exactly.
That kind of thing. And so I don't really think that having constant access is something that parents should be concerned about. The other thing that we heard a lot about was, what if there is some horrific event? What if there's a school shooter? I want my kid to be able to call me. Yeah. Well, we did have a very, very strict policy in our school district, and I would hope that most school districts would adhere to this. You don't want anyone on the phone in that situation because you don't know who they are communicating with.
Yeah.
If there's an inside person, however it is, at that point, it should be allowing law enforcement to do what they need to do. Staff are trained to deal with a school shooter situation, and having people on their phones is not what should be happening in that situation.
And what's it going to accomplish either? If you call in your parent to tell them that there's the worst case scenarios happening, I mean, it's going to give them a couple extra minutes heads up? But I mean, you look at the big picture, unfortunately, it's a tragic example, but you look at Uvalde, Texas. I mean, it's a prime example of what the odds of someone doing something in response as a parent. It's next to none.
Exactly.
And you don't want it. Like the thing that you want is a bunch of upset dads roaming, or moms, whatever, roaming the while there's still an active school shooter, now it's just a complete mess for law enforcement.
Yeah,
it is. And it's a ton of mixed messages. And at that point, the adult that's in that classroom needs to be the one that is directing those students on what they need to do. And again, staff are trained. They go through scenarios on a very regular basis in dealing with that. But they need to be the person in control at that point, not the parent saying, well, you should do this. You should do, no.
Break the window.
One voice at that point.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I obviously don't have classroom experience, but from a church perspective, just going on trips and stuff like that, it seems like, and some parents might not agree with me from my church, but it seems like it just creates more situations, unnecessary situations, because the kid's not concerned about their dentist appointment. The parent is, right? But they're concerned about Joe's bad breath, that, he has bad breath and he wants to stop breathing on me, and talk to mom about it. And we don't need that, right? Like it'll be resolved in the classroom and in the situation by the person that sees the whole picture, not just whatever happened in that.
And I think in those situations, you're robbing that child of the experience of being wherever they're at, if they are allowed to be on their phone.
Right.
I this is just something that I do. When we go on vacation, there'll be lots of people around us, and they'll have their phones out, and they'll be taking pictures of whatever it is. I don't take pictures because I want to experience it and allow my memories to, carry me forward, instead of the 800 pictures that I can take.
You have to scroll through.
Yeah, because you're just you're not in the moment.
100%.
There's a iconic now picture of, I believe it was Tiger Woods, that was on the tee box, and I don't remember the setting. Whatever. There is the whole gallery that's all around them, and they all have their phones out. And there's one dude just standing there, and I think he has a beverage in his hand, and without a phone, just taking in that moment. And the manufacturer of that beverage reached out to that person, and I believe that they did like an ad campaign with him about being in the moment, because it's something that we have lost. We can't just sit back and enjoy a moment. We had to get this grainy video of the moment, so that way we can say we were there. Just enjoy life.
Exactly.
There's a lot to enjoy.
Yeah.
So on this same topic, there's another whole issue with it, that a lot of people don't think the state should be the one to pursue the issue, and it should be a school district decision.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pushback I hear is, because you have such high parental pushback on an issue like this, individual school districts not likely to actually go out and pass this kind of thing on their own.
Yes. And I think we're maybe following suit with Minnesota a little bit. I think 2 years ago they set up a policy that required a school district to have a policy. They didn't say what the policy needed to be, but it required that each school district develop a policy, submit the policy to the state, however that was. That's, to me, best case scenario there, is that it does allow some local control, some local decision making.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Just require it, because it sounded like there was some feedback from the school boards that they didn't necessarily want to set it up. So just require it there. Interesting. The other thing that's interesting is, and from what I'm hearing, there's 2 education savings account bills, essentially two ESA bills in the legislature, and one of them is going to pass, is basically what I've heard. So it's going to be interesting to see how that comes out. One of them is by Collom, Representative Collom, the other one's by Axman. What will be basically the people that are going to benefit generally the most from these are parents that are putting their kids on private schools. That's generally who's going to benefit the most from this.
Yep.
And it's a very nuanced discussion when you dive into it. But generally speaking, as we were talking before, and I didn't even realize this, you actually have seen both sides of the pictures, in that you worked in public school and had your kids go to private school.
Yes.
As you go and you look at education savings accounts and those things, where they affect the way that they're being set up in the legislature right now, what's your viewpoint on them? Are they positive or are they negative? Obviously, it's public money, and that's probably the focal point of the whole discussion. How do you see that they should be handled, or maybe they shouldn't be touched at all?
All right. Well, I've been pretty public about this. Last year when I was running my legislative campaign, I was asked about this in depth. And so I don't know the exact details of of these bills, I know the goal would be to allow for the savings account. I am for school choice, and I'm doing it for a couple of reasons. As you mentioned, I was a 30-year public school instructor, a teacher, school administrator, all of those things. And it is vital that our public schools are strong and available, and they meet the needs of a lot of our students. But I also think that for some families, it doesn't fit all of the needs that they want for their children. Sure. And they would like to look at private schools, usually for religious reasons, but I'll say in other states, sometimes it's charter schools because maybe their child is very musical and their future is going to be music, and they want more of a focus on that. I think that families need to have that choice so that they don't try to make the public school fit the needs of their child. And I've seen that. I've seen some parents come into public schools and say, I am opposed to this type of literature or this book in the library or this presenter or even sometimes this teacher because they have cultural or religious differences with those people. And then they try to cram that down the throats of the public school and make really a square peg fit into a round hole, and it doesn't work. Where if you have options for those families, I think that everyone's needs will get met. And, there's a lot of ways to make that happen. I think that this is an easier way. It does put skin in the game for everyone because those families are going to have to put money into the savings accounts to have it matched. So I'm generally in favor of it.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah. I personally, I think it's probably overall a good thing. But I know that it is interesting. The feedback that we've received on it, just through comments and different things like that, has been way more diverse than what I was anticipating. It's a very, very contentious subject.
Yeah, it's turned very hot over the last couple months.
And I can say, because this was, public knowledge as well. I shared those beliefs when I was running for the legislature. And still did get the backing of the union because they knew that I still desired to have a strong public school. I really do. We met a lot of needs, but I like the options for the families.
Right. Yeah.
My only question with it, and it's a little, tedious, but is there a need to change the wording in the state constitution if this passes?
Kyla loves this.
It's just because it says no money raised for the support of public schools of the state shall be appropriated to or used for the support of any sectarian school. And obviously this doesn't specify that it has to go towards a sectarian school, and even on the surface, I'm all for school choice.
But it says any money raised for public schools cannot go to private schools, right? That's what it says, right?
That's what it says. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just feels a little ambiguous with it.
And certainly, then that should probably be looked at again. One of the other arguments from families who have their kids in private school is they still are paying taxes.
100%.
And, and they're not given the choice that they desire. So, obviously that should be looked at, and it should meet 2025 needs.
Just a little adjustment there, maybe.
Yeah.
I see. I countered Kyler on this one. This is just the only time we haven't agreed.
Pick on me.
The only time we haven't agreed. I didn't say that. I said you're picking on me. But I think it says that if it's public money that is designated for public schools, then it can't be used for private schools. But it doesn't say if it's public money that's designated for private schools that it can't be used for private schools. It just says you can't go into the school funding for public schools and now say, okay, we're going to go and distribute that among private schools as well. So that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair workaround for the language of it.
And I haven't followed the bills closely enough to know where the funding source is, because at one point I don't think that it was taking money from the public schools.
Right.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
Correct me if I am wrong.
No,
I'm pretty sure it's not.
It's not, because from the testimony that I've heard, the presenters of the bills have been very specific about that, because that's one of the things that the committees were very focused on as well, where that funding is going to come. Going to be interesting to see how that plays out. It may end up that neither of them pass, but what I was hearing is that sounds like one of them is going to pass. It's just a matter of which one that the legislators get behind.
The final wording of it and everything. And
yeah. right? Because they are very varying, but we did talk about that on a previous episode. So very, very great. Thank you for coming on today. We've covered a lot of topics.
We went deep into the childcare conversation.
That was good.
There.
That's necessary.
It's important.
It was.
Yes.
Undoubtedly. I think this was a great conversation. Lisa, anything else you want to go over?
So all I'll say is, I think that the discussion around childcare has brought a few people out to talk about their opinions, their thoughts, their needs. I'll say generally, I don't hear from a lot of people.
Okay.
And I encourage that all the time because now I've taken the extra step and I'll follow social media and I can see some comments out there. But I put it back on the residents of our community. If you have something that you want fixed or you have a question that you want answered, call, email any one of us. We will we will respond.
Right.
We really do. And that's something that's been lost, I think, particularly in the last few years. But we are elected to represent everyone in our community, and we're out there to help as much as we can. So, if people have concerns about childcare or whatever it is, give me a call.
I think that's a great point because you guys really are transparent as a council. Like you guys
certainly try.
You guys are very open to conversation. You guys obviously come on our show. You're able to sit down for an hour and have an open discussion. I mean, if anyone ever has questions, I feel all of you guys do a very good job of responding from what I've heard.
Thank you.
And if you don't, let us know and we'll do something.
We'll have them on and ask you a question. Is it still a part-time job? Is it 20 hours a week?
It's never been a part-time job.
It's never been a part-time. Well, yeah, right. But in hours, it's never been a part-time job with hours, right?
Really, it depends on the week. They've been busier. I mean, there can be some down weeks and that kind of thing too. But
like Christmas week.
It's there was someone had asked the question like, is there ever a time? This was related to when we can share our personal opinion instead of filling our official exactly. And the answer to the question is, are we never not a city council member? And the answer was no. We're always a city council member, 24/7, 365. So whether or not we're in a meeting or wherever we're at, we're always council members.
I think that point has been proven over the last few weeks.
Yeah, but I think also you've probably experienced that differently being a school teacher because school teacher is also one of those roles where if you run into your kid at the grocery store, you're still a school teacher. And if you were perhaps yelling at someone at the grocery store, then that's my school teacher.
Right. That would not be a good situation.
It wouldn't be good. So you've kind of lived a life of that where your role has been a 24-hour day kind of deal.
Yeah.
I got one more for you. Since you, before we go, you don't have to answer it, but since you said you are planning to retire from the council next year, this is something we've brought up to a few people. What would your general opinion be on? Because we've pushed for this, raising the wages of city council. Maybe I didn't go where you thought I was.
Yeah, that's good.
It's something that we've pushed for, and it seems like maybe not making these full-time positions, but just upping the pay to make it a little bit more fair.
So. We've looked at this. Yeah. Should this be our only source of income? Probably not.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people are dissuaded from running for public office because of the time that they need to take away from their regular job, and the pay compensation is not similar. So I know in comparison to even some of the local other elected officials, or you look at Bismarck, Grand Forks, Fargo.
Yeah.
Our salary is substantially lower and there are no benefits. So there's not going to be much of an appetite for it. I can say that. And most people are very reluctant to ever even bring it up in discussion because we kind of get pelted with rocks and garbage. But I've always been a proponent of women running for office. There aren't many of us that serve. And maybe that would encourage either another woman to run, maybe would encourage a younger person to run so that we have a little bit more diversity.
Yeah, and it's so hard as a sitting council member to be able to go over that thing or to even be able to push that publicly just because of, like you said, the sheer pushback you'll get. And it's understandable. People see just the surface level, they want to raise their pay. But there's so much more to it than that.
What's crazy is in Fargo, it's considered a part-time job, and the mayor gets paid $60,000 a year. It's a part-time job.
So.
It's like $63 an hour based. I understand. Numbers, I understand that the hours aren't true, but and so it's definitely something that we advocate for. Even if it was a minimum, I think this is part of whenever that is restructured, something that needs to happen is there needs to be an annual given raise, because what's a struggle is it's such a hard topic to bring up. It gets brought up every once a decade. Say it would be close to that. It doesn't get brought up often. To go and talk about pay once every 7 years, even once every 5 years, is a long time, a long gap. Right. So even if there was just some type of
incremental thing
that was every year it's this much, it's not much money, and that incremental is not going to get too high too fast.
Yeah.
So we can look just at our neighbors across town, and that's the Ward County Commissioners.
Right.
So they are considered employees of the county.
Okay.
And so their increases can be increased at the same level that they give to their employees.
I see.
So if it's a 2% increase, however that looks. Now, I've noticed in the last couple of years, the commissioners have said they will not take the increase.
And
so
that's
they
fair.
made that determination.
Yeah. Right.
But at least it's budgeted for, and then it's up to them on whether or not they choose to allow themselves that increase.
Something like that would be phenomenal, because it would really minimize this discussion, I think. I mean, still, you guys get paid. Is it before taxes is $1,300 or something, right around there? It's not very much at all.
No.
When you look at the amount of work and really the decisions that are being made, they're big decisions. So it seems like you would. But interesting. We won't go too far into that. Won't fully open that can of worms at the end here. So, thanks for coming on today. It was a good time.
Being here.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for watching this episode of Minot Talk. We'll be back Thursday, 9 a.m. on. It's Leif's Day.
Yep, Leif Snyder Appreciation Day, April 17th. So be sure to check us out on that day. We've got some special stuff coming.
Absolutely. Have a great rest of your day.